Check. Can you hear me in the back? Am I good? Well, thank you for those kind words of introduction and making me sound better than I actually am. First off, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this conference. It's really great to be here. And thank you all for making it out for the first session of the morning. So what I'd like to do today is talk about some of the work that we've been doing over the last several years, actually, looking at the dynamic structure and function of forest grassland mosaics or shola grassland mosaics in the upper elevations of the Western Ghats. Right? And for my talk today, I'm going to be drawing on the work of a lot of colleagues and collaborators. And so I'd like to acknowledge their contributions right at the start. So I'll be drawing on the work of Dr. Atul Joshi, who's now currently at Flame, Yadagiri, who's at Kriya, Manaswi, who's now a postdoc at Minnesota, and then Hari, Siddharth, Chenga, and Rasika for all their contribution to the work. And also my long-term collaborators, Dr. Jayashree Ratnam from NCDS, Dr. Jagdish Krishnaswamy, who's currently at IIHS, and Srinivas, Srini, and Ravi from Ferrell, right? And so, like I said, I'm going to be talking, most of my work is going to be centered on forest grassland mosaics. And why forest grassland mosaics? Now, forest grassland mosaics are a very unique and enigmatic ecosystem for many reasons, not the least among which is their presence actually flies in the face of one of the fundamental tenets of ecology that we learn in Ecology 101, and that's the concept of a climax community or a one climate, one biome hypothesis, right? So if you take any basic ecology textbook, you'll see a figure like this. This is Whitaker's biome classification scheme, or you can see the Holdridge life zone classification scheme. And essentially what it tells you is for a given climatic envelope, so in this case, the mean annual precipitation and temperature, for some combination of those, you should be able to predict what kind of biome you find there, right? And it holds true for the most part. We know really wet and warm areas hold tropical evergreen forests, really cool and dry places have alpine tundra and so on and so forth. But there are a few places on Earth where this does not seem to hold. And one of them is the classic forest grassland mosaics or the upper elevations that we see in the upper elevations of the Western Ghats. So here what we see is under one climate, you see two distinct biomes. So you see forests and grasslands coexisting with abrupt boundaries between them. And these ecosystems, they tend to be fairly restricted where they occur, but they're fairly widespread. They're not found just in India. You can find them all over the world. So they're seen in places all over Africa, like in Malawi. You can see them in Gabon, Angola, South Africa, Swaziland, Houghton Plains in Sri Lanka, and all over South America too, in Bolivia, and you have the Araucaria mosaics in Brazil, and so on and so forth. Now, if you were viewing these ecosystems through the lens of the climax community, like most early foresters did, and many ecologists and land managers do today, you would have concluded that essentially these are anthropogenically derived ecosystems, right? At some point in the past, they used to be forests, but then humans came and clear-cut this vegetation and converted this forest to grassland. And so now something maintains this grassland state, and you have this mosaic of forests and grasslands. But is that really true? Turns out that it's not the case, right? So I'm going to just show some work. This is from Professor Sukumar's group at CES. And essentially what they did was they took these soil cores and sort of characterized the paleo vegetation of the location. This is in the upper Nilgiris. And because the grasses in these mosaics follow the C4 photosynthetic pathway, and the trees have the C3 synthetic pathway, photosynthetic pathway, you can actually differentiate their contribution to soil organic carbon. So you can see what's the presence of C3 versus C4 grasses. So I'll just quickly walk you through this. So this is the age of the sediment core. They went up to 40,000 years before present. And on this graph, it just tells you the proportion of grasses versus trees, right? And 2 points to take here. One is the ratio of grasses to trees has fluctuated over time for the last 40 years. And this has been linked to periods of low CO2 and temperature, different temperatures and so on, aridity. But the key point here is for the last 40,000 years, both trees and grasses have existed in the system, right? So these systems are ancient, and in many cases, they actually predate human presence, right? Human presence in the Nilgiris has been currently dated till about 4,000 odd years before. And so, but these mosaics, both grasses and trees, have been present for nearly 40,000 years, right? So there's also evidence from other systems in South America, particularly Brazil, again looking at isotopic ratios and also pollen, sediment pollen, which have indicated that in most of these cases, these mosaics are fairly ancient and they predate human presence in the landscape, right? So there's multiple lines of evidence to suggest that these forest grassland mosaics are ancient and they're not human derived. And in most cases, like I said, they predate human presence. And so thus they appear to be natural rather than anthropogenic artifacts. So then the question becomes, what actually maintains these mosaics and how do they come about? Well, I don't know the answer for how do they come about, so I'm just going to conveniently ignore that. What we've been focusing on is trying to figure out, what actually maintains these mosaics, right? And this is not a question that's new. People have been asking this for a very long time, and there are lots of hypotheses that have been proposed over the years, right? So going back to the 1930s with foresters like Ranganathan and so on, one of the first hypotheses that were proposed was its microclimate, right? You have differences in microclimate, which is actually what maintains these mosaics. Others have argued that these are actually edaphic factors, so there's differences in the underlying soil, and some places can support trees, others can't. People have also invoked the role of fire. Again, this is going back to Bohr in 1938, and herbivory, right? So all of the usual suspects have been sort of invoked to explain these forest grassland mosaics. But actually, very few people have actually gone and tested what actually maintains these mosaics. And in the literature, you'll see all kinds of conclusions that have been drawn over the years. So here's one saying, hence, frost occurrence probably does not provide a satisfactory explanation for the restriction of sholas to the depressions and grasslands to the exposed surfaces. Others argue that the assumptions that grasslands are steady state maintained by edaphic factors holds good. Then with no conclusive evidence for the frost hypothesis, the fire hypothesis has gained favor, and fire has an important role to play in maintaining these grasslands. So, so all of these different explanations were still being proposed almost 100 years later, but like I said, nobody had actually gone out and tested it. And so that's what we set out to do. We said, let's actually see if we can test what maintains these mosaics. And our study system, I'll briefly talk about our study system for those of you who are not familiar. This is the Nilgiris, the upper Nilgiris. And one of the things that Atul Joshi did before we started the work, or actually while he was doing the work, was he went to the India office of the British Museum, and he went through the old correspondence of foresters and things like that to get an idea of the history of how these landscapes were managed, right? And so I don't know how many of you have actually been to Ooty. So this is a painting from 1834, and it quotes, if you look at what the governor of the Madras Presidency in 1826 said, actually, this is Ooty town, this is Ooty Lake, and this is what it looked like in 1834, right? Clearly, a forest grassland mosaic, and Thomas Munro, the governor of the presidency, said, the hills, are as smooth as the lawns in an English park, and there's hardly one of them which has not a mass of dark wood terminating suddenly as if it had been planted. So clearly, when they viewed the system, it was a forest grassland mosaic. But like I said, colonial foresters and the whole climax community concept. So what the managers assumed at that time was the indigenous people had mismanaged the landscape with clear cutting, felling, burning, grazing, and all of that stuff. And so essentially what they set to do was right these wrongs, and they decided to go ahead and replant these landscapes in order to convert it to what it should be, right? And so I'll just show you a couple of photographs again to look at the transition of how the Nilgiris has changed. So again, like I said, this is Ooty Lake. This is St. Stephen's Cathedral in 1834. Sorry, I seem to have lost the acknowledgements here. But this is what St. Stephen's Cathedral looked like in 1834. You can see they've started planting some trees. By 1851, it looks like this. There's a lot more trees. By 1905, It's a lot more wooded, and this is the same thing in 2015, St. Stephen's Cathedral. So what used to be grassland is entirely being planted over and converted to forests, right? And again, this is because of the perception that forest grassland mosaics are anthropogenic and they're non-natural. And over the course of about many years, like I said, the main viewpoint of the managers at that time, the colonial foresters, was that it is important to reclothe these grassy areas. And they introduced about 40 different species over time. Many of them actually failed. Some of the plantations succeeded. But 3 species in particular went rogue. And these are black wattle, Acacia mearnsii, gorse, and Scotch broom. Gorse and Scotch broom came later, but black wattle was introduced quite early. And very early on, the British actually realized that this is a problematic species, right? And wattle is a huge problem. It's just gone across the landscape, and this is what it looks like. So that's a patch of shola. You can see the bright green here, and the rest of it is all invaded by wattle, right? All of this area used to be grassland, but now it's converted to wattle. So as you can see, there's been a huge change in this landscape just from the perception, from a misperception of how it should be managed. So I'll come back and talk about the implications of these invasions in a bit. But first, I'll go back to my original, more esoteric and hypothetical question about, theoretical question rather, as to what actually maintains these mosaics, right? So we can think about it as, in a different way, as what actually limits trees from establishing in these grasslands. So if we look at it demographically, the many transitions, it could either be at the seed to the seedling stage, seedling to sapling stage, or sapling to adult stage, right? So which stage actually is it? So the first question we ask are, do soils and microclimate actually influence seedling germination, right? Is the bottleneck right there that seeds are not able to germinate in the grasslands, and that's why you don't find it? And we did a standard, very simple, straightforward experiment where we took soils from grasslands and we took them from sholas, we put them in these germination trays, and we germinated seeds in them. But we placed these trays either inside the shola patch, so that's a forest microclimate, or you place them in the grassland, which is the grassland microclimate. So we have a soil treatment and we have a microclimate treatment, and then we look to see how many species, how many individuals actually germinated. So these shola trees are quite fickle. Some years they generate a lot of seeds, other years they don't. So the first year when we did this experiment, we didn't get too many species, so we had only 2, Syzygium, which is a native, and Acacia mearnsii, wattle, which is an invasive. And it was replicated in 10 sites and all that stuff. I'm not going to go into the details of the methods. I'm just going to focus on the results. So these are the results from the trays that were placed inside the forest. These are grassland plots. And then you have grassland soil and shola soil. And then the dark bars are for the invasive, and the light bars are for the native species. So 3 things that come out here. One is you don't see any, well, invasive species have a much higher germination rate than the native species. You're really not seeing any difference between the soil types. So grassland soil and shola soil, there's not much difference. And if you look at microclimate, actually the grassland microclimate, that is the trays that were placed out in the grassland, actually are doing somewhat better than inside the sholas, right? So there's no effect of soil type on germination success. There's greater germination, in fact, in the grasslands, which is contrary to what we expected. And the invasive species do much better than the native species. Right? So if you come back here to answer this question, do soils and microclimate influence seedling germination? The answer is soils do not have an effect, and microclimate, in fact, seems to be more favorable for germination of these species than otherwise. So then we went on to the next transition, saying, what about the seedling to sapling transition? Right? And so we followed the seedlings that are germinated, we followed them over time. And we just moved them from these germination trays to these grow bags. And again, we had the same thing, grassland soil, shola soil, and then we placed them in the shola or in the grassland, right? Our numbers were a little bit less here because not all the seeds that we put germinated. But again, I just want to show you the survival of these individuals that were out in the grassland, that were out in the sholas. The blue lines are for the native, and the red lines are for the invasive species, and this is over time. And if you look at the grasslands, essentially what we see is by the end of the winter, all the native species are dead, mostly, whereas the invasive species actually is able to survive. right? About almost 50% survived past the winter for 250 days. Whereas if we look inside the shola microenvironment, we see no difference in survival between the native and the invasive. And in both cases, about 50% of them survived. Yeah? So essentially, there's drastic overwinter mortality of the native seedlings, but not of the invasive species. And there's higher survival in shola than in grassland patches. So this and there's also greater survival of the invasive species, but this strongly suggests that something, particularly most likely low temperatures and frost, is actually what's killing off the native seedlings in the grassland patches. And if you think about things like fire only happens in the dry season, right? So by the time the fires come around, these seedlings are actually dead. So it's not that the fires are actually killing them. So even if there were fires in the system, the tree seedlings are already dead by the time the fires come by, right? Right? And so we also measured temperatures inside and outside the shola patches. So this, we placed loggers 5 meters inside a shola patch and then going out to the edge of the patch and into the grassland. And these are records of minimum temperatures in the winter. So inside the shola patch, it only goes to 4 to 5 degrees in the winter, whereas if you go out in the grassland, it goes out to -5 to -6. So just over a 10-meter transect, you're finding almost a 7 to 10 degree difference in minimum temperature. So it's really huge, really drastic differences from inside and outside the shola patch, strongly suggesting that it's likely to be temperatures, the winter temperatures of frost that actually causes this mortality, right? So coming here, we see this transition. Once again, soils do not appear to limit establishment, but native species are unable to establish, but invasive acacias do, right? And so what we actually said is, let's go out and test this. So this is still correlational. So if we manipulate temperatures, then we should be able to manipulate the survival of these species. And this is a wonderful, so the hypothesis being that it's frost that actually kills these seedlings. So we did a warming experiment. This year, the gods smiled a little better. And we had 5 native species and 1 invasive species that we used. We collected the seeds from the field. We brought them back to the greenhouse. We germinated them. Then we transported all of them back into the field. We transplanted them into poly bags. We let them acclimatize for some time. And then we started the experiment. And essentially, the experiment was a warming experiment. So we have 2 treatments. We have a warm treatment and a control, and this is fully replicated. I'm not going to go into the details, methodological details of the design. But essentially, how we achieved warming was we placed these thermal blankets on top of these grow bags every evening, right? And what these thermal blankets do is it just traps the heat in there. So every evening we would go and we'd actually place, over the warming treatments, we'll place these bags and then we'll just remove them out early in the morning. And the control were left just like that. And we measured temperatures in and out. And so this is what the temperature profile looks like over time. For the red bars are the nighttime warming treatments, and the green and the blue bars are for the control. There were 2 nights that we had a problem. One, we couldn't get inside. We had to be out of the PA by 6 o'clock, and because we were running late, we couldn't get in to actually put the grow bags on, the thermal blankets on. Another day, the winds were so high that they just blew off the thermal blankets at night. So those 2 days, the temperatures in our nighttime warming treatment went below 0, but otherwise it was above. Whereas in the control plot, we had 15 nights where the temperatures went below 0, right? And so the question is, do winter temperatures limit establishment in grasslands? So if we look at the control treatments, again, the same results that I've shown before. Most of the seedlings had died by the end of the winter, whereas most of the natives died, invasive species survived. Whereas if we look at the nighttime warming, so even the native species, we have about 40% success survival, and most of the mortality occurred immediately following those 2 events, right? Whereas the invasive species did even better, is about 97% of the invasive species seedlings survived under a warmer climate. Right, so significantly greater survival when protected from freezing temperatures, but overwintering survival of the invasive species nearly 90%, whereas the native species only went up to 40%. Right? So putting all of this together, at least for the high elevation mosaics, so these are mosaics where frost does occur, our results seem to suggest that low nighttime winter temperatures or microclimate, as has been proposed in the past, is the major bottleneck that actually limits the establishment of native species, and that future warming is likely to favor the expansion of trees into grasslands because the trees, all trees are doing better, but importantly, it's going to facilitate the invasive species way more than the native species, suggesting that the invasion problem is likely to become exacerbated. This is something I forgot to mention, but if we look at the data, and this is work coming from Dr. Robin Vijayan's group, about 70% of the grasslands have been lost. We've already lost 70% of the grasslands and to both plantations and invasive species, and warming is likely to make that even worse, right? So there's a huge challenge when it comes to actually managing and restoring these grasslands. Right. So I'm just going to take a little bit of a switch here to talk about the impacts of woody plant invasions. So we've also been looking not just at what's driving the establishment in these plots, but we also look to see what are the impacts these invasives are having in these ecosystems. And this is a photo of gorse. 4 years ago, we were experimenting, 4 years before this photo was taken, and this was a grassland. Right? This happened just before COVID. We were working here. We came back after COVID, and it's entirely what used to be a grassland patch is being taken over by gorse. Gorse, at least what we're seeing, is it seems to be becoming more of a problem right now. We're not sure why. But anyhow, so we've also been working over the years trying to understand what are the impacts that these invasive species, all three of them, have on community and ecosystem processes. And one obvious thing, which is what everybody would expect, is that invasions have reduced plant diversity. So we had paired measurements within invaded patches and in adjacent uninvaded grasslands. And the green bars are for the grasslands, and the red bars are for the invaded patches or the plantations. And in all cases, we see a reduction in diversity. So this is understory diversity. So there's more diversity in the grasslands, and invasion reduces this. It also alters plant species composition, the standard NMDS plots that all of you must be aware of, so I'm not going to go into detail. So as you can see, there are differences in the community between the invaded and the uninvaded. So there's a change in composition too. And one thing that I haven't shown here is the invaded communities tend to be more similar to one another than the grassland communities. So it's also homogenizing the understory in this area. Most of the grasses out in these grasslands are C4 grasses, and C4 grasses have very distinct functional ecologies because they are not shade tolerant. They generate a lot of fuels for fires and so on and so forth. But what we are seeing in the invaded patches, so this is just a graph showing what's the relative abundance of C3 grasses, which all of them are actually exotic. We have exotic C3 grasses here, invasives, in invaded patches and in the grasslands. And essentially what invasion is doing is also changing the physiology from C3, from understory from C4 to C3. So we have a lot more C3 species now in the understory, so it looks something like this. And so this has implications for the functioning of these ecosystems. I'm not going to go into that, but things like carbon capture, nutrient cycling, and so on. Woody invasions have also increased soil carbon and nitrogen stocks. So the green lines are for sholas, the reds are for the wattle plantations, and the blue lines are for grasslands. And this is a function of depth, carbon, and nitrogen content. As you can see, well, both of them decline with depth, as is to be expected, but sholas have much more carbon and nitrogen compared to grasslands, but wattle invasion has, in this case, increased the carbon content and nitrogen content of the soil. Yeah, if you think about it from a carbonification point of view, then this is okay, but this carbon gains come at a cost, right? So we shouldn't be actually focusing on the carbon gains here. Now, all of these three fixers, all of these three species are also nitrogen fixers, right? And you don't have native nitrogen fixers in this ecosystem. Most of them are non-fixers, and so the fact that these species are able to fix atmospheric nitrogen has fundamentally changed the nitrogen cycle in these systems, right? So this is a graph which shows the amount of available nitrogen for the plants in, that's the grassland, and then you have the Ulex patch, Citisus, and wattle patch. And as you can see, in all three invasive patches, there's much more nitrogen available for plant growth. And this is because the invasives are actually fixing this atmospheric nitrogen. And because you have more nitrogen in the system, it also leads to greater losses from the system. So we've been working with Ferrell and Atri, and we've instrumented these catchments. So we've been doing hydrological measurements here, and we've been looking at the concentration of nutrients that are flowing out in streams over time in multiple catchments. So we have catchments that are dominated by grasslands, catchments where you have sholas, and then you have invaded catchments. So we have a gradation of catchments where we've been quantifying nutrient outflows. And essentially, this is what it is. I'll just quickly walk you through this. So this is time on the x-axis, and these blue bars represent the monsoons. So this is a grass-dominated catchment and a shola-dominated catchment, so the native things where there's not much invasion. And the two in the middle are invasive catchments, where catchments that have been invaded. So as you can see, you see the cycle. Once following the rain, you see this peak of nitrate that's flowing out in the streams. It goes down, the next rain, it comes up. And you don't see much difference between the shola and the grassland. There's these peaks. But if you look at the invaded catchments, you're seeing much higher levels of nitrate that's flowing out from streams. And we know nitrate in streams actually reduces water quality. If it goes downstream into water bodies, it can cause eutrophication and so on. So they've fundamentally also changed the nitrogen cycle in this system. Yeah? And finally, woody plant invasions have also altered fire regimes. This is DNBR, so this is just a remotely sensed estimate of potential of fire intensity. So the darker the patches means it's more likely to have had more intense fires. And in all cases, it would appear that the invasive species tend to burn with much greater severity than grassland patches. So they're also altering fire regimes, particularly gorse. Right? So if I just have to summarize these invasion impacts, it tells us the woody plant invasions in these native grasslands have reduced native plant diversity. They have homogenized plant community composition. They have altered ecosystem carbon, nutrient, and hydrological cycles. And they have also altered fire regimes by increasing fire intensity in this landscape. So what does the future hold, right? We know that these systems have already changed, but what does the future hold? So one thing that I've already talked about with the warming seems to suggest that under a warmer climate, there's going to be greater invasion. So that's something we need to be worried about, as in the invasion. The extent and intensity of invasion is going to be much higher. But we've also done other things. I'm not going to talk about it much. Well, do I have 40 minutes? Right? Okay, so I have a couple of minutes. I'm almost done. We've also looked at how warming is going to change plant community composition and influence nutrient cycling and carbon budgets and so on. Again, using open top chambers. So we have these open top chambers which actually warm these grasslands, and then we've looked at things like community composition and so on. But I'm just going to show you one result from this, which has looked at the effects of warming, future warming, on carbon cycling in these ecosystems. We know there's more carbon going to come in because as a result of the invasion, but what's going to happen to things like soil carbon, right? And these OTCs, actually, so this is work done by Yadagiri, and the OTCs actually increase the temperatures by about 1.5 degrees C. And as we can see with a 1.5 degree, so these are soil respiration, so we measure soil respiration over time. And this is the profile of soils, warmed soils, how they're respiring, and this is the control soils. And experimental warming of grasslands resulted in near doubling of soil respiration rates. So there's a lot more soil carbon that's likely to be going to be lost as a result of this warming. And one of the, I don't know if you looked at the numbers here, but these are sort of cool, almost like temperate grasslands because they're at high elevation, so they have very huge carbon stocks, right? And so we've also been involved with the long-term ecological observatory. Some of you might have heard of it. The grassland component, we've sampled about 40 grasslands across the country, and actually these grasslands have the highest carbon content of anything that we've seen. It's about 8% compared to about like 1 to 2% in most other grasslands. So there's a huge amount of carbon actually stored in these grasslands that are likely to be lost. But ultimately, we don't know how that's going to balance with the carbon that's coming in as a result of the invasion. So that remains to be figured out. So just to synthesize what we think is going to happen in the future is that increased temperatures are likely to exacerbate woody invasion of these grasslands, primarily by exotic species. It's going to lead to further loss of native species, many of which are threatened. It's going to alter ecosystem energy, nutrient budget, and hydrological cycles. As of now, even though there's much more nitrate flowing out in the streams, it's not enough to be classified as problematic for drinking water quality and so on. It's still below the limit, at least what the EPA has a limit, but it's been going up, and so presumably nitrate concentrations are going to increase. And it's also going to impact future fire regimes. And what we've been pushing for is that there is a really urgent need to restore these invaded grasslands. Many reasons. One is there obviously is very little of it left, and well, as I talked about, they're under severe threat from these invasive species. And I think it's really great that the Tamil Nadu government has actually come out with this policy on removal and dealing with invasive species. They have 5 species on their target list, and wattle is one of them. So that's kind of great that they've actually started trying to remove wattle from these grasslands. But you can't just remove it, right? We don't know how successful that's going to be, because everything that we've learned over the years is that you go cut an invasive species and pull it out. That's not enough. With lantana, with senna, with anything. And the same thing with acacia, that it's just removal is not enough. We have to go back and actually restore these systems. And there are many things that we need to consider. One is now that nitrogen levels have actually gone up, right? So it's favoring other invasive species. So we need to find a way to reduce nitrogen levels, and we need to find a way to enhance the survival of native species. So even though the clearance has started, I think we're still a long way from restoring these grasslands. And with that, I'm almost done. Wow, I stayed in time. Usually I go over. But I'd like to thank a lot of the people who've helped us over the years, all members of the lab, our amazing field staff in the Nilgiris, the Tamil Nadu Forest Department for giving us permits and working with us allowing us to work in these systems for the last 10 years now. People from Feral, ATRI, funding agencies, and the RM Tulpaleta Charitable Trust for supporting our work. So with that, I think I'll stop and I'll take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
May I have So, in terms of removing these exotics, wattle plantation, what's the strategy that the Tamil Nadu government plans to use? I mean,
so right now they've just contracted it out, and people are just coming and clearing the wattle. They're just taking it out.
So it's really just like an auction. They just say, come and clear it.
So far as I know, that they're just removing, because there's a huge amount of area. But what we know that, well, one of the things we're quantifying right now is the seed bank. And I think there's a huge amount so you have to find a way to get rid of the seed bank too. And we think that you need to burn, because burning stimulates the germination, and then you come back and burn. Okay. So you have to do something drastic to first kill the seed bank.
Yeah. So is there any monitoring, or it's just like?
It's just started actually within the last few months. Yeah. Okay. Well, there have been attempts in the past, but they were like, just here, there. But now, following the government order, it's a very concerted effort to remove them.
Okay, thanks.
Can I have one question?
Just a short one. With all this data, we are going to lose these grasslands.
I hope not.
And that's the question.
Yeah.
How rapidly is that going to happen? With this data that you have over the last few years, how long is it going to take before it gets worse and worse? Because I think it's going to reach some sort of a irreversible point beyond which you find it very difficult to do anything at all.
I think the person to best answer that question is sitting behind, because they've done the trajectories. Robin's group has worked on the trajectories over time. Has it stabilized? We know that now that they've started removing wattle, it's a problem, but what we're seeing is gorse is suddenly it's going off the charts. So I don't know, because most gorse, there's no management plan for gorse or Scotch broom. It's only for wattle, and I think that that's not enough because you're definitely it's going to be a problem for the grasslands. I don't know about the rate of loss. I think, yeah, I don't want to go there. I'm trying to be a little optimistic here, but yes.
I have a
Robin,
quick,
do you have anything
small-
to add to that?
Sorry, my compliments to you for excellent presentation, Mahesh. My quick question is, apart from these woody invasive species, there are quite a lot of grasses, invasive grasses, and some exotic annuals. And if they swamp the grasslands, what would be the strategy for restoration? Because grassland species composition is also changing drastically all over India in most of the places.
Yeah, right now we don't have historic data for the grasslands. So we have for the last species composition for maybe like from 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So I don't know, I don't have any gauge of how grassland composition has changed in the Ooties, but we know that there's invasive species and stuff like that. Luckily, in these grasslands, we don't have too many, at least as of yet, of these other herbaceous invasives that you find just 300 meters down near the tea plantations. We're not seeing most of those here. But yeah, I don't, grassland restoration is a tricky business. I mean, there are very few cases where it's a lot more work than, forest restoration. You can't just plant the grasses and let it go. You need to keep away the grazers, you need to remove the exotics, we need to manage for at least a few years before it has to be untouched till the grass is established before you sort of let fire and herbivory in. So I don't know. If it becomes problematic, it's huge, but right now I think we are okay, at least in the upper Nilgiris. I don't know much about, I think Parni is a lot worse than this, but yeah, no, the grassland, if it gets other invasives, so right now we don't have major invasion in the grasslands other than the woody plants. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fantastic, Mahesh, to listen to this synthesis. And there are a few things that I would like to kind of discuss separately. But one thing I would ask you was if the mortality of seedlings, does the age of the seedling matter? Because what the forest department is actually doing now is they are going out and planting forest trees, I mean saplings, but they're a little bit older and these are huge. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen there? And
all
how
of them
long?
died. But many of these, yeah. So, but I think now they're, yeah. So all of these plantation efforts failed because the native seedlings did not. But if they, yeah. But I think now they're aware of this problem, and I hope they just don't find other ways to plant it. But I think there is a recognition that this is from just a few years ago. But there's a recognition that
They're still doing it
yeah.
in the Palnis, yeah.
Same the Parnis.
Yeah.
So do we know anything about the seed dormancies, Mahesh? Yeah.
Do we know anything about?
The seed dormancy? of
Well, we have a project that's just started, but we know from other work from South Africa, for example, wattle. I don't know about the dormancy, but they flood the seed bank. And presumably, even if they're not, well, actually, I think some studies have shown that some of them can stay for 100 years.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
remember.
100 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a, we don't want to think about, we'll deal with that problem when we get to it. Let's start with
And
the other one.
the other question is about, are these species mainly wind pollinated, or do you think they're also
Pollinated.
Yeah.
No, I think these are
Generally
all, well, the flowers look like they should attract a lot of, yeah. No, I wouldn't suspect that they're wind pollinated. I presume at least gorse and stuff like that, Fabaceae flowers, so I'm,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks for very nice study and presentation, pretty comprehensive. So when you studied different, variations when you undertook the experiments, did you also consider the phytosociology aspect of this? So when I saw your experiments, I didn't see that they were close enough to the existing sholas. So you think if they were closer to shola, the results would have been affected?
Oh, you mean the germination
Yeah.
and things like that? Well, I haven't shown you this, but we've done actually transects just coming out of the shola, just along the same thing where we measure temperatures. You really don't see that many seedlings into the grasslands at all. So maybe just a meter or two outside that, and because those boundaries are like very stark, you can stand here in the shola and you come out in the grassland, right? And we actually don't see them coming in too much into the grassland at all. So maybe right at the boundary they might have, but I think from the work of people like Arundhati and stuff like that, these they're not growing at that fast a rate. So they've been fairly stable, many of these patches, for a long time. So even if there is any recruitment occurring at the edges, it's happening very slowly as of now. But yeah.
Yeah, Mr. It's a nice insight. One thing which is probably missing in your talk is the role of the ungulates, the wild herbivores. And I personally feel that wild herbivore seeds pass through the gut, they have a high germination rate, and that probably might have maintained the grassland community. And it has been well proven in the savanna ecosystem, on the African like that. So what do you think about the role of the ungulates?
Yeah, we have actually gotten now, we just started this project where we've gotten permission to look at what the ungulates are doing. So I think they're doing, I don't know what they're doing, but if the body condition of the herbivores up in these landscapes are amazing. They're like, I have never seen summer that are looking so healthy and great. So we're like, what are they, I hope, where are they getting their forage from, right? So first thing we're trying to do is quantify their diets and see how much of, and also look to see to what extent they're dispersing these, who's dispersing the invasive species. So we've started that. We don't have a very good idea of what it is, but I fully agree with you that ungulates probably play a very key role in the system. Yeah.
Very nice long-term study.
Thank you.
My small query is, what is the difference between protected areas and outside protected area of this shola grassland complex?
There is very little outside that we've worked in. I know Robin has worked in a lot of places outside PAs. Most of our work has been within the PAs. Around Nilgiris, most of the things have gone. So there's not much in the upper Nilgiri landscape, but there are like Misapuli Malay and all of that stuff in Kerala. But,
And second thing is that you say 70% grasslands gone. But what has been the traditional composition in terms of extent of shola versus grassland, and how it has been maintained over a period of time? And what is the current rate of this complex in extent getting altered?
Yeah, so yesterday actually I had shown a map from 1800s, 1850 actually, and how the landscape has changed till 2015. So you'd see that the mosaic has a lot more grassland, and there's almost 40% increase of forests up to 1900s. So I personally feel that climate is a very strong driver of this interaction, also with invasives, because the spread of invasives seems to be happening from the east to the west. So the rate, I think Dr. Barucha was also asking, and I think the west is going to be more difficult to kind of conquer in some sense. And coincidentally, most of the protected areas are also on the west. And fire regime, using fire for management like in how Kerala does, I mean, that really seems to have a strong impact on, I don't know, there's very little invasives in, Eraviculum and so on. So I would think that the climate, I think, has a very big role. And in fact, foresters say that they tried planting acacia earlier on some of these western areas, but now it's coming on its own. Those days it failed. So I don't know.
Must be climate, yeah. So. Please.
Sorry, part of my question has already been answered by him. Actually, as you mentioned that for grassland management, we need to remove invasive species, and we also need to maintain nitrate content in the soil. Even if somehow we are successful in doing that, then how are we going to prepare ourselves to deal with the climate change, to deal with the increase in atmospheric temperature in future?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because I think that should be a management decision. We can either say, well, this is natural climate, it's going to come, these grasslands are going to go, we leave it like that. Or if we want to actually manage for these grasslands, then I think we'll have to use things like fire, like Robin was saying, herbivory, actual, yeah, I can think only of fire, because with many of these invasives, at the initial stages, the fire will kill them, but then once they establish, it's a problem. And once they establish the double whammy, the fire does not kill the adults, and it stimulates germination from the seed bank. So before they get in, if fires are there, it kills many of the seedlings. So I think fire will have to play a role if you want to manage fire and herbivory, like Dr. Yeah. But thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Shankaran, for your engrossing and insightful talk on the often overlooked forest grassland dynamics. Your expertise was really evident in the clarity of your talk and also in the way that you highlighted the urgent need for more action and attention and research in the rapidly depleting yet critical ecosystems that are grasslands. So thank you again. I would now like to invite Mr. Anuranjan Roy to host the speed talks. Thank you.
Rapporteurs, do we have Ms. Sujata Yadav's presentation? Or Sujata Roy, sorry. Do we have Ms. Sujata Roy here? I think her presentation was or is missing.
Yes, we have got Anuranjan.
Shivam, we don't see presentation 4 on this. Okay. Okay, she's bringing. Okay, hold on. So give us like half a minute. We'll just put all our files together. Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final session of Speed Talks. We had a wonderful series of talks yesterday as well, learning everything about the introduction of GORE, how solar plants can sustain some biodiversity, also about garbage dumps and the impacts they have on local wildlife, along with expressways as well. So today we are looking forward to a new series of talks, and we will be adding the final presentation soon, but meaning the fourth presentation soon. But at first I would like to welcome Mr. Shikhar Kaushik. He is a master's student at WII with a keen interest in forest ecology. His presentation is titled Oak on the Edge, Understanding Habitat and Population of Quercus lanata in the Kumaon. Shikhar?
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'll be talking about oak on the edge, understanding habitat and population of Quercus lanata in Kumaon, Himalaya. Oaks evolved around 56 million years ago on American continent and radiated to Asian. There are around 600 species of oaks worldwide. They are dominant climax species, which are found in temperate biome. India is home to 35 species, out of which 6 species are native to Western Himalayas. 3 species out of this, Quercus leucotrichophora, Quercus floribunda, and Quercus semicarpifolia, they form the extensive forest patches and are present gregariously. But the other 3 species are patchily distributed. Out of this, one particular species, which is Quercus lanata, commonly called riange, is another species which is patchily distributed. So it's an evergreen species which is found at elevation of 1200 to 2400 meter of elevation. It's found pure and also frequently associated with Quercus leucotrichophora, which is barn oak. It is very locally distributed in Kumaon, and the information on its ecology is very rare. We don't have much information about it. And most of the Lanata forests are classified under Moru and barn oak forest. And in Nepal, it is classified under lower temperate oak forest. So this brings us to the question, what is the population, habitat preference, and distribution of this species in Himalaya? So this is how the species looks like. So in order to understand where the species is present, we examined 15 herbarium specimens from 3 different herbaria, and then we come across this map where the distribution could be present, and we sampled all these potential locations. So we did snowball sampling, where we did a plot of 1 hectare, within which 4 circular plots of 10 meter, 5 meter, and 1 meter radius were laid. And the data on abundance, girth, breast height, co-occurring tree species, sapling, seedling, and aspect, slope, elevation, canopy cover, invasive species cover, and lopping was recorded. Coming to my results, we found the highest density in the middle elevation. In terms of aspect, we had the highest density in the western aspect. And we wanted to look at the effect of elevation and aspect on the distribution. So for that, we did a GLM, and we found significant results for the south aspects and elevation, which means that it significantly affects the distribution of the oak, this particular species. So we also wanted to look at the community of the species along with the other tree species. So we found that at certain places it's forming gregarious patches, while at other places it's co-occurring with Pinus roxburghi on the drier side and Leucotrichophora and Floribunda on the moisture side. We looked at the seedling abundance with respect to loping and invasive species, and we found that in terms of seedling abundance, it is highly affected by loping and invasive species. And yeah, so we also did the habitat suitability modeling, and for this habitat suitability modeling, we looked at the we only looked at the places where the distribution is from 0 to 1 in terms of the Maxent model. And we looked at the elevation of the preferred class, which was from 1500 to 3000 meter of elevation. And along with the ground points, which we collected from the various field sites. And we found out that the species is dispersing across the continuous ridge, which is above 1600 meter of elevation, and it is avoiding the deeper valleys and which are unsuitable for the species, and the area where the moisture is comparatively higher. In terms of, I would like to conclude my study with saying that the density of the species is highest at the 2150 to 2300 meter of elevation. The regeneration establishment was the highest at the western aspect. In terms of habitat, it prefers the drier slopes, which is the south-facing slopes, and it prefers the windy and rocky outcrop areas where the moisture is less. Though the species is distributed towards the from western part to the eastern Himalayas, which receives more amount of precipitation, but in the local areas, it prefers to appear on the soil and the south-facing slopes where the moisture retention in the soil and the particular area is less. And it also avoids low-lying valley areas where the moisture accumulation is more. In terms of distribution, Nainital is the westernmost limit of this species. And yeah, it is highly patchy in this area. And for the future, the idea is to propose Riange oak forest, which should be a subtype under lower western Himalayan temperate forest for long-term monitoring and conservation of the species. I would like to thank all these people, and thank you.
Thank you, Shrika, for that brief but quite in-depth status of the oak on the edge. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Ravikant Khobragade. Dr. Khobragade is the veterinary officer at Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve with quality experience in rescue, treatment, and management of free-ranging as well as captive wildlife species. His presentation is titled Human-Wildlife Conflict Mitigation and Capture of the Tigers from Wild.
Good morning. Right now, first of all, thanks for organizer to get an opportunity to talk about the very sensitive issue all over the India, that is human-wildlife conflict. And right now, all peoples, all the stakeholders who are taking care for the mitigation and coexistence theory. You all of know human-wildlife conflict occurs when the expanding the human settlement intersect with the natural habitats, leading to negative outcomes like crop damage, property destruction, and human injuries, or sometimes human casualties also. So wildlife can suffer from retaliatory killing, habitat loss, and behavioral disruption. Right now we are facing these issues. Addressing this requires a balanced approach that includes habitat protection, wildlife corridors, compensation, capture of problematic individuals who involved in the conflict, and education to promote coexistence between humans and animals. In Chandrapur, which is this, in Maharashtra, we have the high tiger density and have a lot of man-animal conflict incidences. Since from 2013 to June 25, we captured 94 tigers, which are within 94, 53 females are captured, and sub-adults also there are 54. So we have the capture regions, likewise the human-wildlife conflict for the rescue and for the research purpose also. So today I just want to highlight that what I have done, because in the capturing, in case of human-wildlife conflict, we have captured 41 tigers, and out of that, sub-adult female was 18, as compared to sub-adult male that was 11 only. Again the same, another side, the observations was, within the tiger reserve, we captures only 2 sub-adult females in the human-wildlife conflict. But in territorial forest area, we capture 16 sub-adult females. That data indicates that tiger involved in the human-wildlife conflicts are mainly females of sub-adult age group and from territorial forest division. Right now, this you all of know aware regarding all the sub-adult females who are often involved in the human-wildlife conflict due to several factors, including their need to establish territories, potential competition with their other tigers for resources, and the fact that they are still developing their hunting skill and experiences. Furthermore, their movement and territorial behavior can lead to encounter with the humans and their livestock, especially in the areas with limited habitat and increased human activity. So this is from my side. This is my rescue team, TATR, Tadoba Andheri Tiger Reserve. And I special thanks with all my senior officials and all my RRT members, and especially biologists who are the key role plays in the what you can say, forest conservation, you can say, because of biologists, we can know what are the behavior of the particular individual and what is the movement, what is the track of the particular individual. So we can manage or we can mitigate very easily with the problematic individuals. So all of us says that catching of the problem animal is so, it's not a final solution. So right now, I come with you to have the solution for the sub-adult females' behavior, because mainly I captured sub-adult females who are involved in the human-wildlife conflict, and that is the big challenge for us, because we have the lot of populations. We are dispersing population in all over the around away from the tiger reserve area, and that is quite difficult to manage in the territorial forest area, because there is a lot of human interface in the territorial forest area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khobragade, for that wonderful presentation, and more importantly, for the very tough work that you do every day. And next, I would like to call upon stage, call upon stage Mr. Yadnesh Bhuyarkar, who is from Akola, Maharashtra, and he has recently completed his BSc Honours Forestry from the College of Forestry there. He's a passionate wildlife enthusiast and birder. His presentation is titled, I'll copy it next, Nathan's Swastik plantation model. Over to you.
Okay, I'll use this. Okay. So the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. This Chinese proverb reminds us how urgent and important it is to act for the environment. We all heard of the Miyawaki method, a Japanese technique for dense, fast-growing forest. But today, I want to tell you about our own Indian approach, the Swastik plantation. The Swastik, a symbol of harmony and well-being in our culture, is used here to design plantations that are both meaningful and effective. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yadnesh, and I'm a final year student pursuing honors in forestry at College of Forestry, Dr. Punjabrao Deshmukh Krishi Vidyapit, Akola. Today, I'm here to present my dissertation project titled Nathan's Swastik Plantation Model, a solution to green urban and rural landscape. The work has been carried out under the valuable guidance and supervision of Dr. Harshvardhan Deshmukh, professor at College of Forestry, Dr. Punjabrao Deshmukh Krishi Vidyapit, Akola. Many of you must have heard about the Miyawaki method, a dense native forest technique that helps improve air quality, supports biodiversity, reduces noise pollution, and cools the environment. Inspired by similar environmental challenge, one man has taken a unique approach to greening the earth. A man named Mr. Shanmuganathan, originally from Andaman and Nicobar Islands, left behind his job, family to dedicate his life to trees. He moved to Akola district in Maharashtra and started working on a concept he called Swastik plantation. He doesn't take any or expect any money. He just plants trees with all his heart and looks after them like they are his own children. Swastik for you. It's a reflection of his deep love for nature. Since 2022, he has completed around 120 plantations and still going strong, maybe even planting new one while we sit here today. His first plantation was a simple U-shaped layout, which later evolved into a full swastik design made up of 4 U-shaped zones. Today, both urban and rural areas are facing serious environmental problems. Cities are expanding, green spaces are vanishing, temperatures are rising, and land is degrading, and biodiversity is under threat. Even villages are seeing land degradation due to the poor planning and neglect. This is where Swastik model comes in. Created by Mr. Nathan, the design is inspired by the ancient Swastik symbol, which is both spiritual and practical. Each of its 4 U-shaped arms serve a specific ecological and social function, like open gym, yoga space, free event spaces, and parks. The Swastik model categorizes plant species into 4 symbolic groups: sun, tall trees; moon, short trees; earth, medicinal plants; and star, ornamental plants, all planted in a harmonious manner. Usually with 1 by 1 meter spacing, a 3-row system. A typical Swastik plantation can be as large as 20 by 20 meter to 40 by 40 meters or more, depending on the land available. Some of these plantations are even visible on Google Maps. I studied 4 Swastik plantations, each about 2 years old, to measure their carbon sequestration biomass. The results were promising. Kapshi village plantation had the highest value, 48.43 ton of biomass per hectare and 24 ton of carbon sequestered per hectare. The other 3 sites were also quite close in the performance. All locations showed improvement in local climate, increased birds presence, and were being used as a community space like open gym, walkaways, and garden. Mr. Nathan's Swastik model is more than just a planning method. It's a movement. It helps fight climate change, captures carbon, boosts biodiversity, and creates healthy community space. Whether in cities or villages, the model can transform unused land into thriving green zones. It shows us that with passion, planning, and purpose, we can truly regreen our world. I remember once during plantation drive, I asked Nathan sir that you don't earn anything from it and you don't get anything in return. So why do you do this? He smiled and replied that आप सब लोगों ने पेड़ तोड़ के बहुत पाप किए हैं, बस वही पाप पुण्य में बदल रहा हो. Thank you.
Thank you, Yadnesh, for introducing us to this wonderful new model. And my apologies for saying Nathan instead of Nathan, just points to more to my biases than anything else. And thank you for bringing that up. It's good to know of a new technique which is indigenous. I'll just take a second to, okay, someone is handling it from there. Just trying to get the next presentation on the system. The next presentation is by Ms. Sujata Roy. She is a PhD scholar at the Shri Dev Suman Uttarakhand University Rishikesh campus. She has done an MSc in zoology with specialization in immunology. Presently, during her coursework, and she's doing her coursework and is interested to work on microplastic pollution. Her presentation title is Presence of Micro and Nanoplastics in Aquatic Ecosystems of India. Over to you, Sujata.
Good morning, everyone. Myself Sujata Roy, and I'm a research scholar from Shri Dev Suman Uttarakhand University, Rishikesh. And today I'm presenting my PPT presentation on presence of micro and nanoplastic in aquatic ecosystem of India. Microplastics are the ubiquitous small plastic particles that are of less than 5 mm to 1 micro mm to 100 micro mm, to nano size. Most commonly found microplastics are of microfiber shape, fragments, film, and beads. Commonly found MNP are polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, and polyethylene terephthalates, most along with additives, dyes, and heavy metals. Presence of micro nanoplastic in aquatic ecosystem around the world. Major rivers like Yangtze, Danube, Amazon, Mississippi River, also with Ganga and Chao Phraya River, Surma River, Bangladesh, they are all highly affected by microplastic pollution. Moreover, in India also, various studies suggested in Ganga, Yamuna, Mahanadi, Alaknanda, Brahmaputra, even in Uttarakhand also, like Nainital, Bhimtal, they are also manifested infected with micro and nanoplastic pollutions. Due to, in Uttarakhand, I can say that due to religious activity, tourism, and illegal dumping all around the world, in and around river banks, disrupt ecological habitats, spawning grounds, disease spread, and migration of aquatic organism causes migration of aquatic organism affecting biodiversity. Moreover, many studies confirm the ingestion of micro nanoplastic by aquatic species, which is a serious problem for higher trophic animals. Mostly, micro nanoplastic are originated primarily by intentionally manufacturing them due to our daily necessity products, such as in textiles, cosmetics, products, personal care products containing microbeads, and food packaging products, industrial and agricultural manufactured goods. Secondly, by their gradual degradation and breakdown, secondary micro nanoplastics are produced. Their adverse effects have been shown in aquatic ecosystem and organism, as the suspended microplastics or plastics in hydropower projects such as dam act as a reservoir and causing their gradual release in the water. Moreover, floating plastic also disrupt the photosynthesis process, thus affect food cycle. Heavy metal absorption and leaching of plastic additive in the toxic for aquatic ecosystem also changes physiochemical parameters. Moreover, being colorful, they are also get ingested by macroinvertebrate fishes and vertebrates, causing GI obstructions, and also causes morphological and endocrine abnormalities, sometimes causes mortality, and result in bioaccumulation and biomagnification, thus affecting higher trophic level. Their adverse effects have been also shown in humans by various studies, like one confirmed by Ragusa et al., in which the presence of microplastic in human placenta was confirmed. Moreover, microplastic are also found potent to trigger immunological responses in human body. Mostly women, due to their high adipose tissue deposition, gender differences, and hormones, are more prone for the reservoir of lipophilic chemicals, including plastic also, which can induce specific vulnerability during puberty, menstruation, and pregnancy, and it is also been found to be transferred to the next generation, especially in the male child. Preventive measures that we can take, we can promote using eco-friendly alternative to plastics. Public awareness campaigns should be there. Development of efficient, sustainable waste management infrastructure and policies. Strict rules and regulations should be carried out for people causing pollution around. Mitigation strategies should be avoiding single-use plastic, water bottle and carry bag. Project like Namami Gange for respective river bodies, water bodies can be considered. Efficient sewage treatment plant across our nation, and community-driven cleanup effort for public awareness also. Future solution, development of degradable plastic-like material. Like one study I have read is in the Japan, they are confirming that they have made a polymer-like substance which is biodegradable and dissolved in water after few hours. Moreover, using oak powder, oak tree bark powder, which can remove polystyrite microplastic from aqueous solution. My conclusion is microplastic pollution is a growing environmental concern to fresh water and marine water globally. There is an urgent need for policies and strategies related to ethical dumping and degradation of plastic waste. Sewage treatment plant can help in maintaining water quality, which can again be useful for agriculture purpose in water scarcity area. These are my references, and I acknowledge sincerely to WI and ICON for giving me this opportunity, and acknowledge my supervisor, Professor Smita Bodola, for her support throughout my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata, for introducing us to that very important topic and something which will affect us no matter where we live. Next, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Anuj Joshi, who is a postgraduate in environmental science from Doon University. He has joined the WI in the IDWH Snow Leopard project, gaining extensive field experience. His research interests focus on raptors and avian ecology, and his presentation is on ensemble modeling of climate change in galliforms diversity. Over to you. First one doesn't have any.
So good morning, everyone. Today I'll be presenting on ensemble modeling of climate-driven changes in galliforms diversity and endemism across the Himalaya. So galliforms is a highly diverse order comprising around 70 genera and more than 250 species. Among the major 5 families, the family Phasinidae has the highest species diversity worldwide. In India, 45 species of galliforms are found, of which 1 belongs to the family Megapodidae, that is the Nicobar megapod, while the remaining 44 belong to the family Phasinidae. The Himalayan region in particular hosts the highest number of species, that is 34 in total. This family includes diverse members such as pheasants, tragopans, snowcocks, partridges, quails, and francolins, which are distributed from the lower Shivaliks to the trans-Himalayan habitats. The Himalaya being highly vulnerable to climate change, warrant focused study on the fauna inhabiting this fragile landscape. Galliforms in particular are highly susceptible to these changes, as they have very limited dispersal ability and range restriction within this region. To address this concern, we have modeled the distribution of 26 pheasant species found in the Himalayan region over 2 socioeconomic pathways and for 2 time periods with these objectives. Coming to the methodology, so we have used both primary and as well as secondary data. Primary data includes the locations for almost 10 years, starting from the NMC phase 1 in 2016 till present from our field sites in Uttarakhand, Himachal, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. And the secondary data we have sourced from GBIF, We have selected the 19 bioclimatic layers and land use layers, and after that we have performed a correlation test. And after filtering the layers, we have made ensemble model for each species. And from that result, we have calculated richness, assemblage, clusters, and loss. So these two socio-economic pathways are SSP 1 to 6, which have a temperature increase for 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees Celsius, while the SSP 370, the temperature increase is around 3.5 to 4 degrees Celsius in future. So this is our first result, which is species richness. So the colors here represent the number of species per pixel. For example, the green areas you can see, they have they can hold up to 8 species and vice versa. Species richness we can see here is highest in the middle elevation zones where up to 8 to 12 species can co-occur. Coming to our next result, this map is made on the basis of the current habitat suitability of galliforms, which is a species assemblage cluster. So we have obtained a total of 8 clusters, each color depicting a special assemblage. For example, in the lower elevation, you can see the orange color. It represents the species like peafowl, jungle fowl, and francolin. So the cluster which are shown in the light red color holds the species which are present in the narrow ranges. For example, the species like western tragopan. So the species which are present in the narrow bands, they will be more susceptible towards the climate change. So this is the species loss across different scenarios and years. So in year to 2050, we can see there is a little bit gain of up to 4 species in the central Himalayas. While going forward in 2100, this gain is shifting towards Western Himalaya while the loss intensifies. And over the years, we can see species loss is widespread and intensifying, and the gain is very minimal and localized. So the final result, that is the percentage change in the range size. So the species here are showcased as per their elevational range from lower to high elevation. So across the subsequent scenarios and years, we can see the habitat loss is happening for most of the species. Consistent large losses is for the species like cheer pheasant, western tragopan, which are endemic, and the gain is very low for species like lower elevation species like jungle fowl, peafowl, which can be found in the lower elevations. So coming to the conclusion, species loss is very widespread and intensifies over time, while gains are limited and highly localized. Species richness for galliforms is highest in the mid-elevation, but shows a consistent decline across the future scenarios. Narrow species clusters, especially those in the transition zone, are more prone to climate change. And my way forward is that areas predicted for the future suitability should be prioritized for protection and conservation planning. At the end, I would like to acknowledge all these. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj, for that brief primer on very important ecological indicators and also probably very flamboyant as well. So thank you for the presentation. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Mayank Judal on stage. He is a PhD scholar from Gujarat University in Ahmedabad. And he will be, he's a project leader in Scavenger Ecology Project of WCB Research Foundation. And his presentation is titled The Scavenging by Sympatric Carnivores at Livestock Carcass Dumping. Over to you.
Thank you. Is it on? Yeah. So I am today presenting my ongoing PhD work in which we have examined how livestock carcass dumping sites are sustaining carnivores in the predator-dominated landscapes. So before that, let's look into what is the role of carrion. Carrion or dead animals are playing a major role in the environment as they sustain a lot of organisms ranging from decomposers, invertebrates, and vertebrates. And in India, these type of carrions are introduced in the environment as a form of livestock carcasses. Such livestock carcasses are dumped at livestock carcass dumping sites, which are highly unregulated, but these sites are predictable in terms of the food sources. Such sites contains a small amount of carcasses, like few carcasses, and some sites can have up to like hundreds of carcasses at a time. So this location having a predictable food resources attract a diverse vertebrate species, not just vultures, but they can attract carnivore species and some other generalist species. And despite their ecological importance, these sites remain poorly studied in terms of their scavenging behavior, the interspecific interactions, and the associated risk at such sites. So our study investigated the ecological role of such sites in attracting and supporting multiple carnivore species. And we also examined how these species exploit these predictable and shared food resources. So for that, we have conducted our research in the Junagadh district of Saurashtra landscape. This landscape supports the coexistence of large predators such as Asiatic lion, Indian leopard, and striped hyena. So far we have monitored 5 livestock carcass dumping sites, and these sites are located near the village boundaries and outside the forest areas where livestock carcasses are dumped regularly. And coming to the methodology, we have used camera traps to monitor carcasses from the moment of carcass is dumped freshly on the livestock carcass dumping sites to its complete depletion. And from each photo trigger, we have noted the time of feeding events, the species that is scavenging on the carcass, and the number of individuals present there. So coming to the results, so far we have identified 6 mammalian species scavenging on the carcasses, and notably Indian leopard, striped hyena, and Asiatic lion. These carnivores are utilizing these sites regularly. And out of these species, Indian leopard was the most frequent scavenger. It showed highest feeding events among all them. These are some of the photographs of the different scavenger species which have recorded. So these 3 predators, these 3 carnivores are using such sites co-occurringly. So they are continuously visiting such sites. So for that, we have looked into their temporal activity. So 3 of the species showed moderate to high overlap, showing by the overlap coefficient from 0.61 to 0.78. But when we look at the distinct feeding peaks, lion showed the peaks just before midnight and after the midnight. In contrary, leopard showed its peaks in the midnight and late afternoon periods. And the hyena, which showed similar activity peaks to the lion. But despite that overlap, we are seeing somewhat of different peaks. So it is possible due to, like, they are avoiding the dominant scavengers. So for that, we have seen through the camera trap photos, and we have found a dominance hierarchy between them. So lion displaced both leopards and hyenas, whereas leopard displaced hyena. In this sequence, you can see that the leopard is feeding on the carcasses, and when the lion, it will leave the carcass just before the lion arrives to the carcass. And for the hyena, most of the cases, hyena just come to the carcass when nor leopard or lion were present, and it will just carry the part of carcass and leave the carcass, and sometimes the entire site. So by doing so, they are avoiding conflict from direct confrontation from each other. But despite being predators and carnivore species, they are relying on such sites for the scavenging. So in one part, they are providing essential ecosystem services, which is a carcass cleaning. But other hand, we have found one major problem at that site. Due to majority of the carcasses are dumped in the daytime period when the dogs feeding activity, where dogs were active. Most of the carcasses were first assessed and consumed by the feral dogs. So after feral dogs are coming, and at the night other species are coming. So if this early arrival of dogs and feeding may pose a risk of disease transmission, as we all know that dogs are a vector of many diseases. So that might be a problem. So in conclusion, I can say that these livestock dumping sites have a huge potential to sustain livestock diverse scavenger communities, including predators and generalists. And these sites act as an ecological hotspot, but can pose some risk. So moving forward, we recommend better continuous monitoring of such sites to better understand the scavenger dynamics and recognize their role, not just to predators, but other species. I would like to acknowledge these guys and these organizations. Thank you. If you have any question, here's my mail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayank, for this interesting study on carcass management. So it's a need of the hour. Before I invite the next presenter, I would like to tell all the presenters that be ready at the end of this presentation, move towards the dais for the question answer round. Our next presenter is the host himself, Mr. Anuranjan Roy. We have been seeing him for last 3 days. He works at WIA Category C2C Center for Natural Heritage Management and is fascinated by the way heritage studies touch upon almost every subject. He has a deep interest in nature-culture linkages and the ways in which the ideals of international conventions interact with the practicalities of the real world. His talk is titled Nature in World Heritage, Investigating the Imbalance. Over to you, Anuranjan.
Thank you, Shivam. Given the news these days, it's a little difficult to believe in the impact of international conventions, but I think now is the right time to talk about them and bring them up and discuss a little bit of their importance. So let's begin, since the audience might not be familiar. Let's look at the UNESCO World Heritage definition, which I'm going to be talking about the convention a lot. So the definition of heritage goes, heritage is a legacy from the past, what we live with today, what we pass on to the future. Very simple. So anything which falls under this category can be heritage. For us, it's very easy to look at the pyramids of Giza and say that, yes, it's 4,500 years old, it belongs to all of us. It's a legacy we want to pass on. But not so easy to think about all the time is that there are much older things on Earth which are much older than us. And if you're truly talking about biophilia, or you're talking about what is important to pass on, then we should be thinking about nature as heritage as well. So this idea was, believe it or not very common, and it was first proposed as an international convention in 1972, and it remains the only major international convention which looks at both nature and culture, which is the World Heritage Convention. And I just wanted to bring this map up there so that you can see. I want you to keep a focus on the purple patch up there. Europe and North America comprising of 51 countries. SP means state parties, 51 countries, which means all of Europe and Russia plus USA and Canada. So this is going to be a very important character in our story. But in 1972, it was established, the only major convention with nature and culture in mind, and the most subscribed convention in the world. So no matter if you're North Korea, no matter if you're any other country, you have signed this convention. So somehow everyone believes in that. And I want to take you forward 22 years. So 22 years later, they looked back at the convention. And heritage is a very good reflection of those who are in power, because heritage is something official, right? It's designated. So as you can see, it was very, very Eurocentric. It looked at European sites, primarily Europe, you can see dominating, and particularly, since I'm a natural heritage expert, the focus is also on the low number of natural heritage sites. So there was a decision to try and improve this situation. So in 1994, so about 30 years before today, they decided to evolve a strategy for representative, balance, and credible. On all of those terms, I want you to focus on balance. They wanted to show, because if it's a natural and cultural convention, there should be adequate representation of nature as well. So they came up with concepts of cultural landscapes and other things which were supposed to reduce the Eurocentric influence. So did that really happen? If you look from 1994 to till date, once again you see these are the sites which are nominated after that plan came into place. Once more you see that Europe is running away with it. There are much more sites cultural nominated. The natural sites continue to remain at this 25% level. So the question came to my mind, and it's been asked many times before, is what can we do to make it more nature friendly, live up to its name? Why it was happening? It's a very long drawn process. There's a lot of energy and effort invested into the process, and it's not possible for every country to do it. It's a 5-year process. It's been shown there. There's a lot of technical advice needed, which is given by authorities like IUCN, which unfortunately is not as easily available to most countries, because of which Europe and North America seem to have the resources to invest in. So taking this further, I decided to talk to four heritage experts, two cultural, two natural, to find out what their takeaway was in terms of how the balance can be improved. So one of them said that biophilia needs to be promoted. Another one said that who separated nature and culture? It was a Western enterprise. One of them, who is a World Heritage Site manager, said that what does making a World Heritage Site a natural site mean to me, because it's already protected, right? And finally, the last person said that don't look at site numbers alone, because the site numbers, as you might have noticed, are low. She said, look at the area. So that's how I found that in India, there are 8 natural sites and 35 cultural sites. But the area, if you look at area, then the natural area is much huger. So which brings to what we can do to break this deadlock. Japan has an interesting example of nominating animals as monuments. The Global Biodiversity Framework offers political backing for conservation today, and this pie chart below is a classification of IUCN. As you can see, grasslands is very small, even though grasslands cover a huge amount of the Earth's surface. Now, why does it matter? It matters because I feel that UNESCO or the convention is somewhere between the Oscars and the Nobel. Yes, there is political backing, there is a lot of lobbying which needs to happen, but at the same time, there's a prestige associated with it, because of which a country, if you think of it as a person, would not want to lose its self-esteem by causing it further harm. So any site declared World Heritage is likely to stay safe for perpetuity. And I would like to thank Dr. R. Suresh Kumar, Dr. Nehru, Prabhakaran for initiating the idea a year ago, and I started looking into it, and yesterday I had a discussion with Dr. Madhumita Panigre as well. Thank you. Shivam, are we doing the photo now? It's 10:30. Question, okay.
Yeah, maybe we can have one question for each of the presenter, and then we can head towards.
Right, so can I invite the rest of the speakers on stage, please? Yes, of course. So after the questions, we'll be all headed out for a group photo. Since you have been sitting through all these sessions, the ICCON group photo is happening after these questions. So please join us outside once the questions are done for the group photo.
You may kindly raise your hand or start your mic, and then, you can ask your questions. Yeah.
So my question is for Yadnesh. Yes, hi Yadnesh, nice presentation. So I wanted to ask, like, how is the success measured for this model, and like any tangible ecological benefits we are getting from that model, and how they are different from the traditional agroforestry models that we have?
So actually, all the trees which are planted in the Swastik plantation are native species, and it is a mixed plantation. So the land on which the Swastik plantation is there, so it is a E-class land. So agriculture, we can't do agriculture there. So that land is degraded already. So on that, the Swastik plantation can help to help ecologically and socially, both the ways. And all the 4 U's you have seen in that. So on that use, parks can be built, or open gym, and all these things can be built properly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Roy, I just wanted to ask you, you talked about microplastics. So did you do the classification of it, and you talked about only male child incorporation? So just throw some light on it.
Ma'am, actually the paper that I have read, it was by Helen Lin, Plastic, Gender and the Environment. It said, it was specifically mentioned there that during time, not just when the baby is born, if the woman is introduced to plastic pollution or working in an environment where there is many pollutants of plastic. So during the time of first trimester or during pregnancy, when the baby grow, mostly the male child, actually it was seen that the plastic pollution effect was gendered in male only during the stages of later on stages of development in the genital secondary characters also, genital women.
What is the specific cause? That's what I'm trying to ask. Why is it so?
Actually, that was not mentioned there. It was only there. So I have only read that. So I mentioned it.
I have a question for Mayank. Hi, Mayank, I was just wondering, you only showed the larger carnivores, but do you also see small carnivores at these sites?
Yeah, so we have observed, like the work is ongoing. So we have observed jackals there, also like these mongooses and all. And apart from that, the bird species like vultures and all, they are coming to few sites. But these species which are feeding on the maggots, they are coming more there.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting to look at DL of so many other species as well, to see if there's any partitioning. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mayank. Mayank, you showed that there is a temporal overlap between lions, leopards, and hyenas, right?
Yeah.
So then, but you were concluding that there is a dominance hierarchy, that there's still, that there is competition and there is this hierarchy. So how do you infer that?
So overall, in their activity period, there is high overlap in their activity period. So like these three of species, they are coming to carcass dumping sites every night. And as you can see, like I have told that there are some distinct peaks of their feeding activities. So like in photos, we have seen that the one like leopard come at the late evening periods. And if it is feeding, and then if lion arrives at the carcass dumping site, and if comes closer to the carcass, the leopard just leave the carcass.
Yeah, I think it will be nice to also document that and quantify that.
Yeah, so
that data.
The work is ongoing, so like we are going through the camera traps photos and all. Yeah.
How about the dholes? Dholes were not there?
No, there are no dholes in the Gujarat.
Okay.
Hi, my question is for Anuj, here on your left. Hi. So you chose the two scenarios for climate change, SSP 126 and 370, right?
Yeah.
So 126 is described as near perfect.
Near perfect, sustainable way.
Yeah, sustainable. Yeah. And 370 is moderate.
Moderate emissions.
So, and there is one more scenario which is classified as extreme, right? Yeah. 545. So I'm just curious as to why you chose these two specific ones and not maybe a more extreme one.
So there was no particular reason because the loss is already happening in these two scenarios also. So for now, we just use that two scenarios, the earlier ones. There was no particular reason.
Okay, just as a suggestion, maybe you can try also 545 because these days it's being said in literature that 126 is most unlikely to happen. So as a practical application, that may not have any use. So maybe you could look at 545. The other thing you said was in your future predictions, you probably did not use land use, right? For your present.
I have mentioned it in my methodology. We have used bioclimatic as well as land use layers for future also.
So what was the source of the future?
From MODIS, we have downloaded the future data.
For 2100, you were able to get land cover from MODIS?
Yes, it is available.
Okay, I will discuss this with you further.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, can we have last question? Is there anyone? Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we will break the session, and you are all invited for the group photograph outside.
on your